In the summer of 2001, the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana stood vast and untamed, their jagged peaks and dense forests sheltering both beauty and menace. It was here, in this wilderness, that 24-year-old Leora Kain disappeared, leaving behind a mystery that would haunt her family and community for more than 2 decades. Leora wasn't reckless. She was young, adventurous, and deeply connected to the natural world. A recent graduate in environmental science from Bozeman, she spent her days hiking trails, sketching in her journal, and dreaming of work in conservation. Her laughter was infectious, her spirit fearless, and she carried herself with the restless energy of someone who belonged to the outdoors. On July 12, 2001, she kissed her mother goodbye at their small cabin on the outskirts of Hamilton. "Just a loop up to Shadow Ridge," she promised. "I'll be back by dinner." Mira watched her daughter drive off in her old Jeep, dust rising behind it as it rumbled toward the trailhead. The Shadow Ridge hike was familiar, 8 miles winding through thick fir forests, climbing steadily to a panoramic overlook, then looping back along a gentle creek bed. Lyra had done it countless times, often alone, always prepared. In her pack she carried trail mix, a topo map, bear spray, her journal, and a whistle. She knew the land, respected its dangers, and trusted her instincts. That day was perfect for hiking. The skies were clear, the temperature warm but comfortable. At the trailhead kiosk, she scribbled a postcard. "Mom, the wildflowers are exploding. Love you. Home for dinner." But by 8 that evening, when the sun dipped behind the peaks and no Jeep pulled into the driveway, Mira's unease grew. By 9:30, dread overtook her. She picked up the phone, called the Ravalli County Sheriff's Office, and reported her daughter overdue. Her voice was steady but sharp with fear. "She's punctual. Something is wrong." The initial response was measured. "Hikers lost track of time all the time," the dispatcher explained. But Leora was not just another hiker. She was cautious, disciplined, and above all, punctual, a trait carved into her after her father's untimely death when she was 12. To Mira, lateness meant danger. At dawn, the search began. Helicopters circled overhead, their blades thundering. Across the valley, rangers and volunteers spread out in teams. K-29 units sniffed the trails. For a while, clues offered hope. A set of boot prints, matching the tread of her Merrills, marked the dirt near mile 2. At mile 3, searchers found an apple core, fresh, discarded along the path. She had been there, alive, moving, but beyond that, the forest grew silent. The trail forked near the ridge left, to the overlook, right into a shadowed ravine. From that point on, there were no more signs, no footprints, no broken branches, no sound of a whistle. It was as if Lyra had stepped off the earth itself. The command post at the trailhead grew into a small village, maps taped to walls, radios buzzing with static, coffee urns steaming day and night. Volunteers signed in, their faces weary yet determined, and through it all, Mira remained. Eyes bloodshot, hands clutching flyers with Lyra's photo, her bright smile, her determined green eyes. She wouldn't just disappear, she told anyone who would listen. But the Bitterroot was merciless. Steep cliffs hid sinkholes and caves. Fast rivers could sweep away a body without leaving a trace. Darkness brought predators, bears, mountain lions, wolves, and theories swirled like storm clouds. Some believed she had fallen, lost to an unseen crevasse. Others whispered of a bear attack, though no tracks or blood were ever found. The darkest theory was human, foul play from a stranger, a drifter haunting the trails. A hunter named Jox Harland reported seeing a suspicious truck near the trailhead the morning Lyra vanished. For a moment, hope flared, but the lead fizzled. The owner had an alibi, and the trail grew cold. Soon, the media arrived. News crews from Missoula set up camp, beaming her story nationwide. "Young hiker vanishes in Montana wilds." Headlines blitzed. Donations poured into the search fund. Psychics phoned in with visions of dark water and shadowed figures. Mira stood before cameras, her voice breaking as she pleaded, "Lyra, if you can hear this, we're coming for you." But as days slipped into weeks, hope eroded like trails under relentless boots. By week 3, the official search scaled back. Resources were redirected to wildfires and rescues elsewhere. Volunteers trickled away. The command post emptied. Helicopters moved on. Only Mira remained, wandering the paths alone, calling her daughter's name into the silence. The case file was closed under the label "probable misadventure." For the sheriff's office, it was another statistic in a state where hikers went missing with unsettling regularity. But for Mira, it was a living wound, raw and unending. She quit her job at the local library and dedicated her life to finding answers. Online forums became her second home. She hired private investigators, each chasing leads that dissolved into nothing. Rumors taunted her. In 2005, someone claimed to see a woman like Leora working at a diner in Idaho. In 2012, a hiker swore he saw her ghost near the ridge. Each tip ended in disappointment. Years passed. Mira aged. Her hair silvered. Her steps slowed. But her determination did not falter. On the walls of her cabin, maps of the Bitterroot were covered in pins and notes. Every lead documented. Every theory explored. Birthdays passed in silence. Anniversaries marked by candlelight. Vigils. Friends remembered Leora's love for stargazing, her dream of protecting Montana's wild lands. Whispers grew. Maybe she had taken her own life. She had battled depression after a painful breakup, but Mira dismissed it. She was healing. She told anyone who asked. The mountains were her medicine. Decades blurred together, but the forest does not keep its secrets forever. Decades blurred together, but the forest does not keep its secrets forever. By the early 2000s, Leora's case had faded from the headlines. Other tragedies replaced hers. Missing posters yellowed on bulletin boards, her name spoken only in whispers among those who remembered. For the Ravalli County Sheriff's Office, her file sat on a dusty shelf, labeled unsolved. For Mira, every day remained a search. She organized memorial hikes each July, walking the same trail her daughter had taken. Sometimes 2 people joined her, sometimes 50. She carried a wreath to the ridge overlook, laying it down with quiet prayers. Peace at last, my girl, but not without truth. In 2018, a new ranger named Cale Draven transferred to the Bitter district, a decorated veteran of search and rescue operations. He had an eye for details others overlooked. Reviewing cold cases one winter night, Leora's file caught his attention. The evidence box was thin. Photocopied maps, a few Polaroids, a page torn from her journal. But something about the precision of her notes and the vagueness of the investigation stirred him. Why did she veer off trail? He wondered aloud. What scared her? Still, the file remained stagnant till fate intervened. July 22, 2024. 2 teenage hikers bushwhacking near the north face of Shadow Ridge stumbled upon something half buried in moss. A faded backpack, weathered but intact. Inside, a water flask, a map, a journal sealed in a Ziploc bag, and a small folding knife. With initials engraved on its handle, L.K., the sheriff's office, was jolted awake. The find was undeniable. It belonged to Leora. After 23 years, the ridge had spoken. Detective Silas Crow, a stoic investigator with a reputation for closing cold cases, was assigned. He contacted Dr. Aaron Voss, a forensic specialist, renowned for extracting evidence from degraded material. Voss carefully dried the journal, revealing smeared ink but legible fragments. The last entry chilled them. The ridge calls. Peace at last. It wasn't just poetic. The handwriting analysis suggested stress-hesitant strokes, uneven spacing, letters pressed deep into the page. Signs of fear. Crow studied the folding knife. Blood traces lingered on its hinge, degraded but testable. DNA confirmed it belonged to Leora, not animal, human. She had bled, likely injured in a struggle. The case reopened with urgency. News spread fast. Backpack of missing hiker found after 2 decades. Media vans returned. Locals whispered, and Mira braced herself for memories she had carried like stones for years. Draven led search crews back into the ridge, combing every ravine and gully. Days later, under a stand of old pines, a volunteer spotted bone fragments. Forensic analysis confirmed the worst. They belonged to Leora. The location deepened the mystery. The remains were not where searchers had combed in 2001, it suggested. She had been moved or hidden deliberately. Crow's instincts sharpened. This wasn't just an accident. Someone didn't want her found. Attention turned to old suspects. The name that surfaced again and again, Vance Whitaker. Vance had lived on the outskirts of Hamilton, a drifter with a record of trespassing and poaching. In 2001, he'd been questioned but cleared for lack of evidence. He claimed he hadn't been near Shadow Ridge, yet neighbors recalled him returning home with scratches, muttering about a nosy girl. The problem: Vance was dead. In 2003, he overdosed in a Missoula motel, his brother Thorne arranging a quiet burial. With Vance gone, any confession lay buried with him. But Draven wasn't satisfied. He re-examined old logs, reports of poaching, illegal traps, and unlicensed hunting camps near the ridge. A pattern emerged. In the summer of 2001, a surge of complaints clustered in the very area Leora vanished. Maybe she saw something she wasn't supposed to, Draven said, and someone made sure she stayed quiet. Meanwhile, Mira pored over the rediscovered journal. Her hands trembled as she traced the ink. Among sketches of wildflowers and ridgelines was a rough map of creek bed, marked Quiet Spot. The meaning haunted her. Had Leora gone there willingly, or had she been chased? Crow pressed further. He interviewed Thorne Whitaker, now in his 60s, living under house arrest for unrelated charges. At first, Thorne denied involvement, but under pressure, his tone cracked. He admitted seeing his brother return bloodied and shaken the day Leora vanished. He said it was Vance, Thorne whispered. She wouldn't stop asking questions. Why hadn't he spoken sooner? Shame, fear, loyalty. But his words shifted the case from tragedy to crime. Draven and Crow conducted a final sweep of the ridge. Near a rocky overhang, they unearthed a buried metal box. Inside, dried ginseng roots, illegal traps, a ledger of buyers, and a note dated July 2001. Problem solved. It was chilling. A coded admission that tied Leora's death to Vance's poaching operation. She hadn't just wandered off, she had discovered his secret. The find made national headlines. Cold case cracked after 23 years. Donations surged to Mira Foundation, now funding ranger patrols and wilderness safety programs. But even as the community mourned, Draven sensed the ridge wasn't finished revealing its truths. As summer waned, search teams returned again to Shadow Ridge, scouring with renewed urgency. The forest, quiet under a canopy of gold, seemed to resist giving up its secrets. Then, one afternoon, a ranger spotted a scrap of green fabric snagged on a thorn bush. It was cotton, weathered yet unmistakable, identical to the jacket Leora wore in her last photograph. The fabric carried faint blood traces, confirmed by Dr. Aaron Voss in the lab. His voice was steady as he logged the evidence, but his hands trembled. She didn't go quietly, Voss told Detective Crow. She fought. The discovery ignited both grief and fury. For Mira, it confirmed what she had long suspected. Her daughter had resisted until the end. She studied the rediscovered journal pages, her fingers tracing each stroke of ink as if they could summon Leora's voice. The final entry, "The Ridge Calls, peace at last," now seemed darker, like a plea swallowed by fate. Mira contacted a handwriting expert. The analysis confirmed what her heart already knew. The script bore signs of haste and stress. Leora had sensed danger. She hadn't wandered blindly. She had walked into confrontation. The trail pointed back to Vance Whitaker. Digging into his past, Crow unearthed more than just petty crimes. Old police records revealed bar fights, arrests for poaching, and whispered accusations of assault. A former co-worker recalled him ranting about a nosy hiker weeks before. His overdose, hinting at guilt that had gnawed at him until it killed him. The missing piece was intent. Why Leora? Why that ridge? The answer arrived in a twist of fate. During a memorial hike in autumn, Ranger Cale Draven followed a hunch, straying from the group toward a mossy ledge near the ridge crest. There, half hidden by roots, he spotted a glint of tarnished metal. That it was a belt buckle, ornate and custom-made, unlike anything a hiker would carry. Beside it lay a shallow depression in the soil, disturbed as if something once buried had been pulled free. Draven knelt, carefully excavating. His hand brushed leather, a wallet, weathered, but intact. Inside was a driver's license for Vance Whitaker, expired, dated 2002, and a folded scrap of paper. The note read only, "She saw too much. Had to." The words hit like a hammer. It was a confession, chilling in its brevity. Leora hadn't been a random victim. She had stumbled into Vance's world, a world of poaching camps, illegal trades, and violent sand. He silenced her to protect it. Detective Crow was summoned, his police SUV crunching up the ridge road. The evidence was bagged, sealed, and rushed to Dr. Voss's lab. Ink and paper matched materials from 2001. Fingerprints, faint but recoverable, aligned with Vance's profile. the belt buckle traced back to a custom order tied to a fight on record at a Hamilton bar. "This wasn't chance," Crow muttered. "It was a cover-up. He killed her because she was a witness." The revelation reframed the entire case. Leora hadn't merely gotten lost, she had been targeted. Mira received the news with a storm of emotions: relief that truth had surfaced, rage that justice came too late. She stared at the wallet photo of Vance, his hollow eyes and gaunt face now, the embodiment of her hatred. Old park reports resurfaced in her mind. Dan answered poaching complaints near the ridge in 2001, ignored for lack of evidence. Now she knew. Leora's journal entry about the ridge had been no coincidence. She'd spotted Vance's camp, and her sense of justice had driven her to confront him. The community rallied. Mira's foundation expanded, adding a hotline for wildlife crime. Donations flooded in. Grief transformed into action. Every dollar felt like a blow struck against the shadow that had claimed her daughter. But the ridge wasn't finished. Dravon and Crow launched one final sweep of the overhangs. Beneath a rocky shelf, their searchlights glinted on metal. A buried cache, ginseng roots, illegal traps, and a ledger scrawled with names of buyers. The last entry, dated July 2001, read simply, "Problem solved." It was damning. A cold record of Leora's death reduced to 2 words. Confronted with mounting evidence, Thorne Whitaker finally broke. In a recorded interview, his voice monotone, he admitted helping his brother bury the box. He claimed ignorance of the murder until after the fact, but his silence had made him complicit. "I thought it ended there," he murmured, hollow-eyed. Charges against him escalated, though his failing health limited punishment to probation. Still, the truth was undeniable. Leora had uncovered a poaching ring, confronted its architect, and paid the price. The ridge, once a sanctuary of peace, was now fully mapped as a crime scene. For Mira, it was a bitter victory. She laid a wreath at the site where the wallet was found, whispering, "You were right to fight." Detective Crow, flipping through the ledger one last time, closed it with a grim nod. "Case closed," he said, yet Ranger Draven's instincts nagged. He felt the wilderness still whispered one more secret. The ridge seemed quieter after the cache was unearthed, as if the forest itself exhaled. But Ranger Cale Draven's instincts kept him restless. Something lingered on, echo of Leora's story unfinished. One evening, as dusk painted the bitter sky in shades of copper, Draven trailed behind Mira during a small memorial hike. The community had gathered once more, their footsteps crunching through leaves, candles flickering in glass jars they carried. Mira walked at the front, her silhouette a beacon of quiet resilience. As the group paused near the overlook, Draven's eyes drifted to the underbrush. A glint caught his gaze, a flash of metal in fading light. His pulse quickened. He motioned for Detective Crow, then stepped carefully toward it. Half buried in soil lay a small, tarnished locket, its chain broken, the clasp rusted. Draven brushed dirt away and opened it. Inside, one half held a faded photo, a young Leora, her smile radiant, her hair shining under summer sun. The other half cradled a lock of dark hair tied with thread. The discovery struck like a thunderclap. When Mira saw it, her knees buckled. Tears streamed as she clutched the locket. "She wore this when she was little," she whispered. "She must have taken it for luck." Dr. Voss confirmed the hair matched Leora's DNA. To Mira, it was proof of her daughter's spiritan amulet she carried into the wilderness. But its presence here suggested something darker, likely ripped from her during the attack, discarded in Vance's haste to bury his crimes. The soil inside the locket revealed more than sentiment. Forensic analysis showed traces from the gully where Leora's body was found, but also from a different site, a dry creek bed, miles north. Crow's brow furrowed. "A second location," he said. Guided by this clue, Draven led a small team north. Their boots crunched across parched earth until they reached a limestone overhang. There, the ground bore signs of disturbance. A shallow pit, its edges weathered by time but unmistakably shaped by human hands. They began to dig. What surfaced was haunting. A shredded map fragment, a bootlace, frayed and muddied, and a crumpled note in Vance Whitaker's handwriting. Gone clean. No trace. The implication was chilling. This creek bed had been Leora's first resting place. Likely, in panic, Vance buried her here after the attack. But when search helicopters swept overhead days later, he had moved her body to the gully. hoping to confuse investigators. The find explained why Leora's backpack had been discovered far from her remains. She had fled toward this familiar, quiet place she had once sketched in her journal. But instead of peace, it became the site of her final struggle. When Mira learned the truth, her grief deepened, yet clarity came with it. Her daughter hadn't wandered aimlessly. She had run, fought, resisted. The community responded with reverence. A candlelit march stretched from Hamilton to the creek bed. At its center stood a new memorial stone, inscribed with Leora's words, "Peace at last." Mira's voice trembled. As she spoke, she found her quiet spot, but it became her battleground. Let's honor her fight. Donations surged to her foundation, funding ranger patrols and educational programs. Each dollar became a shield for the next hiker, the next daughter who might otherwise share Leora's fate. Meanwhile, Crow confronted Thorne Whitaker with the new evidence, the locket, the note, the creek bed. Thorne broke further, his voice hollow. "I helped him move her," he admitted. His silence, he explained, had been a pact born of fear and loyalty. But now, the truth pressed against his chest like an iron weight. Though his age spared him prison, probation and shame marked his final years. For Mira, it was bitter closure. Justice was imperfect, but silence had been shattered. At her cabin, she framed the restored locket. It hung on the wall, a bittersweet reminder of her daughter's courage. Ranger Draven installed a sign at the creek bed, warning hikers of off-trail dangers. Around it, Mira planted wildflowers. Life bloomed defiantly, where tragedy had once rooted. Yet, even as the case closed, the wilderness retained its mystique. Every ridge shadow still seemed to whisper. Every trail still hinted at untold stories. The Bitterroot Ridge stood taller than ever, its slopes wrapped in autumn's fiery cloak. For years it had been a place of silence, its shadows concealing secrets too dark for daylight. But now, after decades of searching, truth had clawed its way back into the open. Mira often returned to the ridge, sometimes alone, sometimes with the community that had carried her through. Each visit felt like opening an old wound, but also like pressing a bomb against it. Where once she had feared the sound of the wind rattling through the pines, now she welcomed it as Leora's voice, soft, persistent, alive. Ranger Cale Draven became a quiet guardian of the area. Though the case was officially closed, his instincts never allowed him full rest. He walked the trails at dawn, boots brushing against dew-wet grasses, listening for the forest's whispers. To him, the ridge had transformed from crime scene to sacred ground, a place to remember not only tragedy, but resilience. Detective Silas Crow filed the final report with careful precision. The note in Vance's hand, the ledger of poachers, the locket, the second burial site, all threads woven into a grim tapestry. His closing statement read not like an end, but like a warning. Wilderness holds stories, and sometimes those stories bleed. The community embraced remembrance as ritual. Each year, on the anniversary of Leora's disappearance, they hiked together, lanterns glowing as the sun dipped behind the peaks. The trail wound through golden meadows and crimson slopes, ending at the stone carved with her final words, "Peace at last." Children carried flowers, elders spoke prayers, hikers whispered promises of vigilance. It was no longer a morning march, but a celebration of a spirit that refused to fade. Mira's foundation flourished. With donations and grants, it built ranger stations, launched safety workshops, and opened scholarships for young environmentalists. The hotline for wildlife crime uncovered dozens of poaching cases. Every call, every report, felt like a ripple of justice, carrying Leora's legacy further than her footsteps ever reached. In her cabin, Mira created a small shrine. The framed locket hung above a shelf holding Leora's journal, a pressed flower from the ridge, and the hiking boots her daughter once wore. Each morning Mira touched the locket, whispering, "You were right to fight." It was her way of grounding grief into purpose. As years passed, the ridge slowly shed its association with fear. Tourists still came, drawn by its beauty, but they paused longer at the warning signs, the memorial stones, the wildflowers planted by Mira's hand. Leora's story became woven into the land's identity, cautionary, heartbreaking, inspiring. For Draven, the wilderness remained a teacher. He often told young rangers, "Every trail holds a tale. Respect it, or it will write you into its pages." His words carried weight, shaped by the memory of a young woman who had fought for life until the very end. For Crow, it was a reminder of justice's imperfect timing. He knew the law could not resurrect Leora, nor drag Van Whittaker into court. Yet, by revealing the truth, he felt they had reclaimed something vital, the dignity of her struggle. And for Mira, it was both wound and balm. She had lost her daughter, yet gained a movement. She had buried a child, yet raised a legacy that stretched beyond her own lifetime. The ache never left, but it no longer consumed her. One autumn evening, years later, Mira stood once more at the overlook. The forest stretched beneath her, bathed in fading light. A hawk circled above, its cry sharp and free. She closed her eyes, letting the breeze lift her hair. She found her quiet spot. Mira whispered, "And now, so have I." The ridge, with all its shadows and revelations, stood as both grave and monument, a place where truth finally outlived silence, a place where every hiker, pausing to read the memorial stone, might carry forward Leora's unyielding spirit. If this story of loss, discovery, and resilience has moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more journeys into the wild's untold depths, because every trail hides a story, and every story deserves to be heard.